Against cycling habits is the Tunbridge Wells Bike User Group, which has recently been campaigning for a new cycling lane to be added between Tonbridge and Tunbridge Wells. I caught up with the group's spokesman, Paul Mason, earlier today. So, Paul, thank you very much for joining us here today. Welcome to Invicta Sport. Now, the statistics that we've been analysing show that 0.37% of Tunbridge Wells and Tunbridge's overall population choose to cycle to work. Does that surprise you?
Well, not really at all, Bartholomew, no. For most people, the very idea of getting on a bike and sharing it with heavy, fast-moving traffic is, well, they just say, I'm sorry, but I can't do it because it's too dangerous. And that's why we've been campaigning for, segregated or dedicated cycleways. Particularly, just recently, the focus of our campaign has been the road between Tonbridge and Tunbridge Wells, the A26, which is, a nice big wide road. I know there are points on the road that are difficult to put a cycleway on, but actually it's just a question of good design, and most of it, no major problems. So, no, that statistic doesn't surprise me at all, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think safety is one of the sort of reasons people were talking to us on the street as to why they don't cycle more than they do at the moment. Is that something that can be simply solved with road layouts?
Well, I mean, if you consider the case of Holland, anybody who's been to the Netherlands will know that, it's a sort of cycling paradise. And I mean, they were committed to the same kind of society as we were in the 1970s, with more and more cars and buildings being knocked down to enlarge roads and so on. And then they suddenly thought, well, hold on a moment, is this what we really want? And they did a complete volte-face on that, over a period of a decade or 2 decades. And then since then, they have prioritised pedestrians and cyclists and so on, and given them room. And, Holland is a country quite like ours in the sense that it's a overcrowded country with lots of people and potentially a lot of cars. It's got lots of old medieval cities with narrow streets, and of course canals on top of that as well in Holland. But they have succeeded in retrofitting a lot of really excellent, safe and pleasant to use cycle infrastructure. So it can be done, but it's a matter of political will, of course.
And you mentioned earlier, Paul, your campaign to add a new cycle route between Tonbridge and Tunbridge Wells, and you've got quite an interesting way of doing that. You get these sort of big mass cycle rides together. What was behind that idea?
Well, essentially, if you're going to get cycling infrastructure built in this country, you have to persuade politicians that the desire for dedicated cycleways is not that of a sort of small, entitled minority of middle-class, middle-aged people in Lycra. It's something that lots of people want. So that's the idea, really, to have 200, 300 people riding along the road demonstrates in a very public way, that lots of people would love to be able to cycle if it were safe, and would be very willing to do so. So that's really what's behind it. And so that was the purpose of our mass rides, to show that it's not a minority interest group. It's just lots of ordinary people who'd like to be able to cycle, just as they did in this country back in the 1950s. A third of all journeys were undertaken by bike.
All right, Paul, thank you very much for joining us today.
Not at all. It's a real pleasure.